Hooray!
Hey, hi there, everyone. Welcome back to Tales from the Table Studios. We're here for the Days of Tales 2 Charity Weekend, where we are raising money in support of NAMI. The National Alliance for on Mental Illness. NAMI supports people all across the U.S. struggling with mental illness through advocacy, education, and community programs. If you'd like to help out with a donation, you can type exclamation point donate at any time and it'll pull up the Tiltify link in the chat. I am Esther. I use she and she pronouns, and I am here today as part of a really awesome panel that's going to be talking about disability in the tabletop role playing game space. You may know me from Twitter as at Dungeon Minister or as the GM of Chromythica, a Pathfinder 2e actual play campaign, or as one of the new co hosts of the No Direction podcast, which is a Pathfinder reviews show. And that's a little bit about me. I am so excited to invite my fellow panelists to introduce themselves. And I will invite Keegan to go ahead and tell us about you.
Hello there, I'm Keegan, and you can find me at Steadfast Petrol. You may know me from Warding Bond, where I play Silas Chatri Burke, and you may also know me for the upcoming audio drama that's entirely queer-led, Eerie.
Hey, I'm next. Yay. Hi everyone. I'm Basil. They them. I haven't been in anything in terms of like, tabletop stuff. Or have I? No, I'm just kidding. But you probably know me from I was immediately gonna say you probably know me from my shit posting, but that's only if you follow me on Twitter at Koban Yakana. Um, Otherwise, you probably know me from the crowdfunding campaign I had for my horror game, Pelogos, about death, grief, the afterlife, ghosts, licking walls, apparently, according to my playtest group. Um, Otherwise, gosh, you know, it's like in this moment, it's like, yes, I've written for things, I've done tabletop stuff, but it's like, what have you done? And my brain's like, I don't know, it's empty in there. There's just tumbleweeds. Gosh. I've written for things, I swear. I have a portfolio. I design games. Let's just go with that. And I'm a sensitivity consultant. I have helped with many, many things. Yay.
I guess that makes me last, huh? Hi, I'm Wilder. A lot of you probably know me from my appearances here as on the World Ended Today, previous Days of Tales games, a couple other things, and you may have also seen me on here as Hooligans. And I do have a couple other appearances coming up. You can find me on Twitter at TTRPGFay, and I use they pronouns. I mostly do behind the scenes. That's why you don't see me often, but I am so excited to be here with these wonderful, amazing people.
Thanks, y'all. So, with that being said, let's get into our discussion today. We are going to have I would say, a fairly loose discussion. We have a few things on our minds to talk about, but we also really, really welcome questions from the chat. If you have questions about disability in tabletop, accessibility, any thoughts you'd like to share with us, please go ahead and we will love to talk about all that. I wanted to get us started off by asking just what we mean when we are individually and like collectively talking about disability, because some people define disability in different ways. It can mean different things to different people. So I wanted to open with that question. Like, what do we mean when we're talking about it?
Yeah, so I can kick that off. So I would say, just speaking for me, I definitely subscribe to like the social model of disability where it's like, you know, if things were utopia, like that one meme, like the world, if X did Y, where, if everything actually was properly accessible, if things were great, if, the handicapped accessible the accessible, entrance wasn't in the back of the historic building. That's a I have a grudge with some of the buildings in my state about that. But you know, then would you still be considered disabled? By that logic, no, because there's nothing preventing you from, fully integrating into society, enjoying your life, living, your dreams. Like they just renovated the bathrooms at my job and they spent all this money, but the doors still have handles. There's no way for them to open automatically, even though they spent all this time with like automatic sinks and everything. It's just strange. But that's sort of like my sort of idea of what I mean when I talk about disability. And I think also to maybe like a greater degree, like how people perceive like the other, like if you don't fit within what's considered to be the quote unquote normal model of normalcy, then you are an other, you are disabled, you are black, it just depends on what doesn't fit the model of the day.
I definitely agree and second all of that. I also like to playfully call it a subscription club that you may subscribe to, um, whether in a few decades or when an accident or illness happens. I like to say that I am speed running disability. Um, I would also describe it as having either mental or physical quirks that make it difficult to navigate what the majority considers as access.
I have nothing more to add here besides bathroom doors are my personal enemy when they do not open automatically. Why are they so heavy?
Such a good question. Like access, I love the theme of like accessibility that's coming up in all of these answers. And I feel like I completely agree with everything that's been said. My personal definition is something like very similar to what Keegan said, like anything that causes our bodies, our minds to fall out of like the dominant culture's construction of quote unquote normal or quote unquote like what you should be able to access. Anything that is sort of constructed as deviant in that way for me becomes a kind of disability. And that can mean like mental illness, neurodivergence, physical divergence, disability, like chronic pain, so many different things. So I love that. I think our definitions painted a really beautiful broad portrait. One thing that I forgot to do in our introductions that I did want to make space for is ask to folks to give, if you're comfortable, a brief visual description of yourselves for anybody who might need that as an access tool who's in the watching the panel right now. I can start. I am white. I have long blue hair. I have a silver septum ring and a gold nostril stud, and I'm wearing bright red lipstick today and a yellow shawl over a black sweater.
And you look amazing. Is it all right if I go next?
Yeah, please do.
All right, so you all cannot see me on camera currently, but I am also white. I'm a fairly delicate, femme-presenting person, and in my photograph, I am wearing bright red lipstick. I am a brunette, and I do wear glasses 24/7. If you're interested in it, my bone conductors have a pink and purple stripe on them.
Okay. I'll go next. So I am Black and Indigenous. I am wearing a red beret that is shaped like a strawberry. Occasionally, as you see me move around, you might see the green strawberry stem on top. It's hard to get it in camera. I'm wearing blue eyeglasses, black headphones, over-ear headphones, and I have on a yellow sunflower button-up that also has butterflies, bees. Oh gosh, is this corn, heather? Wheat. I'm like, what is that thing I'm allergic to? I'm sorry. Yes, with wheat on it. I'm not the best at identifying plants, everyone, but that is what I'm wearing, and black slacks, which I don't think is showing up on camera, which is good. I'm not a fan of those pants.
Oh, love that shirt and love that beret. I am a Thai person. I wear round gold glasses. I have short hair, and I am currently wearing a black sweater.
Awesome. Thanks so much, y'all. We all look fantastic, just gotta say. Um, so, getting into some of the topics we talked about, thinking about publicly today, I wanted to start us off by asking our thoughts on accommodations and accessibility at the table. What shapes that can take? What experiences have we had, maybe of access that felt really good? And what are some common experiences of inaccessibility and how we can change that to accessibility? Just a broad general topic, but if folks have examples and thoughts, please feel welcome to chime in.
I actually had the amazing experience at a private game where absences were narratively rewarded, in which your character's story progression still happened while you were not at the table, and you had fairly high control over that. For instance, I'm going to plug Justina Revolution here. She is the DM that did this for me, and she is amazing. You will see her later in Days of Tales. And she handed my pirate a necklace of water breathing when I was gone for 3 sessions due to a medical flare up. And it felt really good to not lose out on the experience at the table while also feeling like I could then provide more and have motivation to come back.
I really love that. For those who may not know, oftentimes disabled or chronically ill people deal with flare ups in our bodies that prevent us from showing up to a regularly scheduled game. And sometimes that can lead to conversations where folks are less than understanding about the needs of our bodies. And so it really, really makes a huge difference to feel like we can miss things and not be punished for it or have that like punitively taken out on us in game. That can be a really shitty experience as a disabled person. And I love that like access was made in that way for you. What are some other experiences of like needing access at a table that we've had, or in the process of like game design? Like what are some experiences of needing access and maybe finding that we've had?
Yeah, I can definitely go ahead. I think there have been a lot of times where uh, I might be picking up a new game with my usual playing group. And a lot of the times, I often have issues with not only brain fog, but like brain fog also affecting the way I read. So oftentimes, certain text fonts tend to be hard to read. Sometimes letters are really small. So it often takes away from my experience of really understanding the game because I'm so focused on like my brain processing what are the little squiggly lines right in front of me. So definitely there's a need in a lot of game handbooks for plain text versions of what they have because I also want to enjoy this game.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what you said, Keegan. And thankfully that also helped to jumpstart my brain because it's been a long week and I did not sleep well. But I remembered that was a falsehood. I am actually in something. I forgot I record for this thing. I'm in the Cybertopia actual play with my buddy Ben Dubin. Sorry, Ben, if you're listening. I didn't mean to forget. But one of the nice things on the subject of accessibility is I have dyscalculia, which is funny as a game designer. All the numbers don't like to sit still. So one of the nice things is with the character sheet that Ben made for the game he designed, there's a cheat sheet. And so when you scroll down a little bit in the PDF, you can see here's what you need to do, here's the simple math, here's the examples, and it's so much easier. And just in general, being able to have access in general to like a calculator or like, an online dice roller, like when I'm doing things like what is the actual probability of this? I don't know. Let's ask the internet because I'm not going to come to that conclusion. but yeah, especially having that cheat sheet down there because there were a few times when I was doing rolls and just it's like, oh God, it's math time. Wait, what do I do again? And just the fact that everyone, Ben and all the other players, were just really patient as I was like, sorry, hold on. I just need to add these together. Do these skills go together? The fact that, like, like I'm sure we've all had that experience where someone gets a little annoyed or, like, why is it taking you so long? Maybe it was your math teacher. It was usually my math teachers. Where it's like it shouldn't take you this long to do basic math, but nobody got upset, nobody had any issues, and so it made it go so much more smoothly because math is always so much easier when you sense that everyone's mad at you and you have to rush. That definitely makes the numbers stay still.
Patience is definitely so important when you're dealing with a brain that does not want to cooperate for whatever reason. The understanding and giving time to learn at your own pace has probably been one of the best things and one of the worst things in contrast as a player of games.
As someone who also has dyscalculia, I so relate to all of that. I also think there can be this extra added pressure, like as a player and as a GM of an actual play, to remember the entire like math system underpinning a game structure. And this feeling of like, if I don't know how to calculate all of that in my head, especially in like a public way, and we do pre-recorded instead of live streaming, but like then it becomes this construction of like, am I good enough? Like, am I an actual GM of this system if I need a cheat sheet? And I love that I'm at a point in my like access journey where I'm like, hell yes, of course I am. That's just like an accessibility need. And it's so possible to make those like cheat sheets or helper materials and to use a calculator. I wish I had it with me. I have a Pathfinder 2E GM screen that has this fantastic table of like DCs by level, so I don't have to remember them and calculate them in my head. It has saved me so many times in the moment. And I often wonder, if non-disabled people feel the same pressure around using that. Like I feel like sometimes there's a conversation around disabled people using our accessibility tools that becomes rather judgmental, or like this construction of you shouldn't have to do it. And I think that's really a symptom of like ableism in this space. I feel like I'm also rambling on this topic. Somebody else please jump in if you have like thoughts. But yeah, I really appreciate that we're all naming like using our accessibility needs and tools, and that's fantastic.
I want
What
to
are,
say you were not rambling. That was a beautiful statement. And I really appreciate the part about feeling judged for using our accessibility tools. We need these to play. We need these to be here, and trust us, we want to be here as often as possible. If we can make it easier for us to be there, we will be there more often.
yeah, Basil.
I was just thinking about it and I realized that probably like one sort of accessibility tool that I feel that's kind of just become mainstream is there's a couple of shops that I follow that sell like spell trackers, but like they're like really cute ones like pink and green and like pin style or like charges of like whatever barbarians do that I don't remember off the top of my head. It's like this little spinner thing so you can just like move it around and keep track of like how many you still have left. And I feel like in terms of like trackers and those sort of things, that's kind of made it sort of mainstream and acceptable by non-disabled people. But at the same time, when you get down to it, that's an accessibility tool because it's like you don't have to, along with everything else, keep track of, what's in, how many spells you have left, how many charges of this you have left, even just like writing things down like on a notepad, it's like those are all accessibility tools. Those all help you play the game and, be an awesome player or an awesome GM, or in another Discord server I'm in, someone's working on this thing where they have a bunch of spreadsheets do all the calculations for you for like, initiative and fighting and all this other stuff, maps and whatnot. And I'm just like, one, awesome. Two, it's another accessibility tool because I know, like, briefly when I was doing a playtest for my game, I'm like, I I've lost track of the initiative. Friends, help me. Where who is next? So just having those tools, and I'm trying to think. There was like a real world curb cuts. That's what it is. I was like, what was that real world equivalent? Yeah, curb cuts, about how, it not only helps people who, use wheelchairs or are on crutches, it also helps people who push strollers. It helps people with luggage. It helps me, as long as it's not that curb cut with those awful bumps. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Those like
Oh,
those little,
yes, we do.
yeah, I'm like, I know you guys have to. I hate those things. They're not helpful. They just hurt. But yeah, it's kind of like that, only for tabletop, where I'm honestly hoping that, like, as more places and more people start using these things, that it's just like, oh, and look, here's, it's like, it's not an issue if you use a calculator, or if you have this screen that keeps track of everything, you know, because I don't really think it's a sign of great skill to be like, oh, I'm keeping 20 separate things for 8 different people, in my mind. It's like, you're not Professor Xavier. Nobody cares, man.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up curb cuts because I was gonna say the Snuggie, which was also something that was co-opted by a lot of non-disabled people, but was initially meant to be used by wheelchair users. I definitely really agree that there are accessibility tools out there that are becoming in the quote unquote mainstream. I also just really enjoy the slow like demystifying of being a GM that's happening. Like more people are learning about what goes on behind the screen and also learning that their GMs are human and aren't always on there 100% of the time, especially if they are neurodivergent and or disabled. Um, gosh, I really am looking forward to the day where um this isn't like some avant-garde thing to use accessibility tools and in fact becomes like curb cuts like you said, Basil.
I am loving the direction of this discussion. I'm curious on that note, like what are some of the experiences that we as disabled players and GMs and designers like bring to the table in terms of accessibility tools that we need? Like what are some things that GMs and players and just like the communities in general can do to offer accessibility? Um, yeah, and we can definitely tailor this to our own experiences too.
I'll say for me, in terms of like a neurodivergent thing, I do appreciate that, like, when I'm, recording stuff for Cybertopia, or even, I of course forgot that I'm in another D&D related thing because we're still in the early stages. It's not going to be recorded or anything, but the fact that I don't have to have my camera on, because, it's fine for this panel. It's a panel. I'm enjoying the conversation, and, whatever. But the fact that I don't have to sit there and have my camera on and then think, okay, am I making eye contact? Do I look, approachable? Do I look engaged? Am I smiling enough? Am I smiling too much? And then it's like, is the reflection of the screen showing up in my glass? Just a lot of mental load that I already have to do with the math involved in tabletop games. It's like, no, I don't want to do that. So the fact that, that tables have been accommodating to, if you want to turn on your camera, you can turn on your camera, but if you don't want to turn on your camera, you don't have to. And the fact that there's that follow through, because, sometimes people say things, but then you can tell from their body language that they would really prefer that you would have your camera on. My previous boss was like that. But, I think just, being welcoming and open to accessibility needs, and, doing your best to accommodate those needs. Like, I think nothing honestly annoys me more when places are saying, like, we want to be accessible, we want to help you, we want to support, people all across spectrum and disabilities and neurodivergencies. But then when you tell them, oh, okay, cool, I need this accommodation, they're like, oh no, we don't we don't do that here. we don't we don't have the means to do that, or it would cost too much, or my favorite that came up in my previous job, if someone has an issue and they bring the concern to us, then we'll do it. And that is such a wall and a level of hostility that's not needed if you had just done the thing to begin with. Especially if it's something simple as just clicking a button to turn on a function. Like, it's bizarre to me.
I felt called to speak because we mentioned being off camera. And hi, I'm off camera today. You all have noticed closed captions on this stream. It's something that I have personally encountered a lot of pushback for, as it is something I really do need in order to fully participate. I'm super grateful that Tales from the Table Studios has gone to the lengths they have for closed captions. And it's just something I would really appreciate to see on every stream, as well as transcriptions for podcasts, because I cannot participate or consume your content if there are not transcripts of some kind. I would really like to enjoy the wonderful things everyone does.
Gosh, I'm very lucky in that the tables that I have been at have been very accommodating in one way or another, mainly because I work with a lot of people with neurodivergencies of many kinds. But I do definitely think something that I wish was more common, and this was previously mentioned before, was finding ways to creatively and narratively um, sort of right away around absences, because especially with flare-ups and especially sometimes with just having real world jobs, it can be hard to always be present at every single session. So that's definitely something I hope to see down the line in not only stream games, but also home games.
I love all of this so much. I feel like one thing that folks can do if you're looking to create a more accommodating environment is in talks about when a game is getting started, if you have surveys that you have folks fill out, or you have like a group meeting, bring up accessibility there. Like, that's a huge thing. And to go to Basil's point, like, when you ask about any accessibility needs, please follow up like sincerely. I think perhaps I've definitely experienced being asked, well, what do you need? And telling people, oh, these are some accommodations that would really make it possible for me to be in a space, and then being told like, actually, no, that's too much work for us. And when that happens, I think it's really, really easy to feel as a disabled person like I'm not valued or I'm not really wanted in that space. So I think my ask to folks, to non-disabled folks especially, is if you put out an accommodations request, know how you intend to follow up with that, and like know that it might be work to make access possible. But it really is worth it. I think about how we at Crow Mythica transcribe every single episode that we put out into the world, and how we are a group who's operating with not a ton of funds. We don't get paid like millions or thousands or even tens of dollars to do this. But we transcribe every episode because it's a commitment we really want to make. And that often means our stuff comes out on a schedule that is irregular. It doesn't drop every week. And so I think another really big thing for me is inviting people to an understanding of like disabled time and how that influences disabled creators and creatives. Like, maybe we won't be able to show up for every session. Maybe our stuff gets dropped on an irregular schedule because that's what our bodies can handle. And I just invite people to like roll with that. Come into disabled time and stay a while, and please support us anyway, even though we're not like dropping something every week. Or when we do, it may be a little delayed. Like the invitation is to support us anyway. Um, I'm looking at what else we had written down to talk about real quick. So if there are thoughts while I am looking at our stuff, please go for it.
Yeah, I can add a thought. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm like, unless you wanted to go. I did see in the chat somebody was talking about allowing fidgets at the table. Yes. Oh my gosh. That's part of the reason why I try to make sure my hands are never in shot because I am, well, right now because I'm cold, I'm fiddling with my hands, but I am much like my dad. I am a chronic tapper. If I don't have something to fiddle with, I will just start tapping on the desk. Sometimes I'll get distracted and I'll just start grooving to whatever music is in my head. But oh no, did I lose the thought I had? Yes, now I remember. Okay, speaking of time, two things. I was reminded of that tweet that Imani Barbarin made on Twitter about the difference between colored people time and cripple time, which was funny because it was so early that I had to message my sibling because I was blanking on which version we were talking about. And Z was like, "Oh yeah, no, colored people time." I was like, "Right, right." I don't know how I forgot, but it just ended up being a really funny story about the intersection between being Black and also being disabled. But one thing that I've really enjoyed being at tables and doing tabletop stuff in general is the increased use of people like posting times using hammer time or like other sort of time zone changing wizardry that shows whatever time it's going to be for your setting. Because I have time aphasia, so like, you know, it's a little bit like that meme. How much could a banana cost $20? It's like, how long could this task take me? 20 minutes? No, it takes an hour or longer. Or it's like you blink and suddenly 3 hours have gone by. And so having, you know, someone posting something with hammer time saying this is coming up in 3 days, you know, this is coming up at this time is immensely helpful to me. Or just like we're taking a break for X minutes. That's always so much more helpful to me than like I can't remember who it was, and I don't want to name names anyway, but sometimes people will say stuff like, "Oh, we'll be back at a quarter past whatever." I have no idea
And you
what you're
spent
telling me.
20 minutes figuring it out. So I am
Yes,
very high contact with the time changes. And as someone who also has a form of time blindness, like if I'm not aware and on it, I will totally miss this thing. I also want to bring up if you tell me we're going to meet soon, I'm going to go into waiting mode to preserve spoons. So please give me a real time. Schedule that time with me.
absolutely. Like my friends know if I say like soonish, soonish is probably like 15 to 20 minutes. Soon is like 5 minutes, but I've definitely gotten into the habit of saying soon and then the actual time in parentheses because my soon is not my sibling's soon. Good gosh. I've asked her to do some things like, hey, can you do this real fast? And real fast will be like an hour later. And it's like, no, I needed that within like 10 minutes. And so just communicating that is just excellent. But yeah, just I would say definitely is an accessibility thing, um, especially because I cannot read analog clocks. It's either a time aphasia thing, it's either a neurodivergent thing. I don't know. My sibling can, so I think it's dyscalculia related. I'm not sure, but generally, I would say like if you're meeting with people and playing games or even just talking in general, just say the time, man. Like please don't be like we'll be back at 15 till and then because I've been in meetings and I've said 15 till what? Till we go home? Till lunch? Till we're not on break? I don't and then I've had people be stubborn about it, which is weird. They're like, yeah, 15 till. And I'm like, till what? And they're like, you know. And it's like, no, no, I don't quite I don't understand. But yeah, just we'll be back at 3:15 like that. Boom, I've got it. I've set an alarm. My brain has captured the time. Excellent.
So we have a message from Chloe in the chat who says, make sure not to guilt players that have to cancel due to mental or physical issues, because guilt can be pushed without even realizing it. Check your language.
I will
Yes.
say they continued that comment. Sorry, you're missing it, Esther. And if you say you're going to be there at X time and you're late, communicate. Anxiety tells me you're dead. Same Chloe.
Thank you. Thank you. I cannot actually see the chat, so I'm getting messages about what's being said. Yes. Maybe we could spend a minute. We touched briefly on this earlier, but spend a minute like talking about our needs and in terms of canceling and also like guilt around disability and how guilt can be weaponized by non-disabled people in any context, but also in the context of like tabletop. Maybe what are some of our experiences and thoughts and pushbacks around that?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's definitely a mix of not only outward ableism that exists around us, but also internalized ableism. I feel like it's very hard to escape that as a disabled person, and also in the creative sphere as well, when social media demands you to release everything every like 5 minutes, or else you're irrelevant. But yeah, I really second the idea of guilt just being very intrinsic to rest and to absences. And I definitely agree in that there should definitely be some conversations on how to navigate the need for rest in such a hyper productive capitalist society. And also just like respect that without adding whatever guilt we already have in our bodies to others.
Definitely, definitely. I think like, definitely some of the best interactions I've had is where I've had to like when I'm doing like consultations, I've had to message clients and be like, okay, hey, sorry, this is gonna be a little later than planned. I'm having a health flare up, which usually means my scoliosis is acting up and I literally just I can't sit up, I can't get out of bed. It's like I've crawled to my phone to send you this message, but there's also like I want to be at that stage where I can just be that forthright, but then there's also, I think like both external and internalized ableism of like, there are some people, where you could just tell them, hey man, my spine's trying to escape scoliosis problem. I'll catch you later. And they're like, okay, feel better. But then there's other people where it's like, oh, that was too much information. I'm uncomfortable. So, but just like the best interactions I've had have been people like, rest is important, it's okay. We can extend this out, or I don't need it this urgently. Just, working with me, accommodating. And definitely, I think also, you know, there are some people I know who mean it with 100% sincerity, but will just respond with okay. And I think like also including like a tone indicator is always helpful. Like if they put like sincere or heartfelt or what have you, then I know, oh, okay, so it's not the okay of I'm annoyed at you. It's the okay of like legitimately just, okay, cool. And so, definitely I've had some experiences where it's like, for one reason or another, I've had to, not do this or in my association with something else. And then the guilt that just comes out of it is like, okay. Or even just like your own internalized guilt where it's just like, I'm thinking about the mountain of chores I have outside of my bedroom that I need to do. And it's like, come on, why haven't you gotten this done? Look at all these tasks you need to do. Your mom never had a problem doing all of these. And it's like, yeah, yes, she did. That's part of the reason why she spent most days resting, which is what you should be doing. Like, changing your mindset is so hard because I used to just be that person who was like, no, we have to get all these chores done completely, or you're like a failure, or you didn't do it right. You have to be able to do all this math in your head. You should be able to play this character flawlessly, all these preconceived notions. And then it's just like, I think that's one of the gifts that people say, when you turn 30 is like finally you're like, I'm gonna live for me. I choose peace.
Is that what's
Just,
happening?
just
Sorry.
oh sorry.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I turned 28 this year and I'm starting to do exactly that. I'm going to live for myself. And I think it is really important to bring up that internalized shame we have when we can't complete everything we want.
Like so many people online, like I'm thinking Black Girl Lost Keys, Amani Barber, and um, Mo. I'm sorry, Mo, I cannot remember your Twitter handle. The Nap Ministry also on Twitter, talking about the importance of rest, the importance of taking things into steps. Like one example, I used to just be really obsessed with cleaning all of my bathroom, like in one go in one setting. But the problem with that is without fail, every time I would have a spine flare. My wrists would start swelling, my fingers would start swelling. And then I would have to spend like, if I did it Saturday, I'd spend Sunday in bed. Or if I did it Sunday, then Monday, I'd just be horrible at work. I mean, I have my own office. I wouldn't be like mean. I'd just be like exhausted. And so instead, breaking it out over the week, like, okay, today I do the mirrors, tomorrow I do the floors, has been so beneficial. Much in the same way, like if I'm designing a game, it's like, okay, today I'm doing the world building, tomorrow part of the math, not all of the math. We'll do the combat today, and then maybe we'll do the skills tomorrow. Is just so much easier because then because obviously my laptop's in my bedroom, and so when I'm designing a game, I'm designing it in my bedroom, so I don't end up in that situation where your bed starts turning into like a source of stress because it's right next to your quote unquote work computer. So breaking it down has just been super beneficial, and I feel like I got a little off topic there, so I'm sorry.
Not at all. I love all of the shout outs you gave to amazing people on Twitter I've learned so much from. And it's funny, I was thinking about the Nap Ministry as y'all were talking. For those who don't know, Trisha Hersey is a Black woman who writes about rest being like radical resistance. And she grounds this in a framework of like Black liberation. And she's written a book, Rest is Resistance, a manifesto, which is absolutely amazing. Highly recommend it. And I've learned so much from her work around how rest is used as a tool of capitalism and white supremacy to shame us, to keep us not liberated. And that if we make time for really purposeful rest, that is an act of resistance and liberation. And as a disabled person, wow, did I ever resonate with that framework? Because we're so often told, everybody, but it hits disabled people in a particular way, that our bodies need to keep up with a pace of productivity determined by capitalism, determined by dominant time culture. And if we can't keep up or sustain that, then we are not good enough. Something is broken, something is wrong. And so reclaiming our bodies and our own optimal pace and our own relationship with time is such a powerful way of liberating ourselves. And I love that all of you brought that in. And I think it's so key to life and also to tabletop as a part of life. It often feels to me as a GM like I should quote unquote be prepping something in a certain way. And if I haven't spent like 8 hours, that's the number I pulled from nowhere, 8 hours on prep, then I am being a bad GM and I haven't figured out all the DCs. I haven't figured out all the NPC descriptions. And I love, as Keegan was saying earlier, the demystification of being a GM, because I'm now giving myself permission to be like, you know what matters is that I am able to be as present as possible. I won't be able to do that if I haven't rested enough, if I haven't given my brain enough time to reset and become a little less foggy. So what really matters is that like I take care of my body and my spirit at this time, and that will enable me to show up in the moment and be the best GM that I can. And or be, let me rephrase that, and be someone that I am at home with being in that moment. Best is a framework that I want to push back on in myself a little bit. So, yeah.
I love that. And what you said just reminded me of, I can't remember the person who said it, so I do apologize. But it was be present, purpose, and progress, not perfection.
Yes, I really wanted to touch on on perfectionism as well. Just gosh, the fact that any of us are here is awesome in and of itself. And I know not only for disabled people, but also for non-disabled people, that's really hard, because sometimes I want to show up to a game completely not brain fogged and completely well rested and able to do XYZ. But I also know that even with all the rest in the world, I'm still someone with a pain and fatigue disorder. That's not going away. I really am thankful for the non-disabled people in my life who are um, sort of helping with this push towards rest and being restful, because chances are, if you know a disabled person, there's a very big chance that they are not only overworking past their own limits, but probably past your own able-bodied limits. So not only recognizing when you're tired in yourself is helpful, also recognizing that is helpful. I've had many times my non-disabled friends go, "Hey, you gotta slow down," because I would be tired if I was doing this. And it just clicked for me like, oh, yes, fatigue, that is a thing everyone feels, and I am not the only one who feels this way, and it is good to rest. So I think definitely there's a lot of camaraderie to be made in being human, in just really prioritizing rest. I'm really excited for the burnout panel that's coming up later in the Days of Tales. I'm so excited for that.
One thing I wanted to bring in a panel Keegan and I were on together before, this was like a big hit in the chat. And so I was like, I'll have it handy. And it just, the topic has reminded me of a tool that we use in a lot of games I'm a part of, the break card. Um, where we use a series of like cards to communicate with each other about whether the game is going really well and we want to like keep going in that scene, and we will show like green, and then we have yellow and red, which indicate like, ooh, maybe we need to slow this down a little bit or head in a different direction, and then like hard stop, we need to take some time and recalibrate and talk to each other and then move forward. We have a few disabled people in the cast of Crow Mythica, myself as the GM, and just several people in the cast as well. And we realized we needed a tool to communicate with each other when we've got to take a break. And folks were wanting something that was, in addition to coming off mute and just saying it, a visual indicator. And it's been really, really awesome to just have a card that says like break, that lets me know as the GM if somebody has to like take a break for whatever reason, and lets me also communicate that like I need to take a break. It's been really cool. Highly recommend it. And I think that like this perfectionism narrative can get us so caught in a really constricted way of being. Like we have to continue to play for a certain amount of time at the table. We have to show up not brain fogged. I'll be honest, I'm really brain fogged right now and feel like I have gone everywhere in trying to coordinate the panel. When in reality, as Keegan said, like a lot of disabled people, this is our baseline. I know pain and brain fog and fatigue are basically my baseline. And no matter how I show up, I'm always going to show up in that state in some way. And so I think welcoming ourselves to just do that, and then for our non-disabled friends to and communities to welcome us in that, and to be a support and to give us encouragement to slow down, to take the breaks we need, to take the access we need, is huge.
I love that break postcard. I'm going to call it a postcard. It is brilliant, and I am so stealing that for my games. Thank you for bringing it. Um, I did. I was thinking as you were speaking about the variation between each day, especially for us. And when you touched on, oh my gosh, all of us have brain fog. When you touched on that, even when we show up at our best, as you said, moving away from that terminology, it is us doing the best we could possibly do in these given circumstances. And it's so important to understand that every day the best is going to be different.
Absolutely. I also apologize. I have two animals, an old German Shepherd and a middle aged rabbit, and both of them have decided to begin making noises about this time. So I'm not sure how much of that will filter into the mic. And thank you for your understanding if it does. Um, I also wanted to just going down the list of topics we'd thrown out to talk about. We have kind of touched on accommodations and accessibility, absences, dyscalculia, and we've just touched on working with brain fog. We'd also talked about bringing forward discussions about accommodations and accessibility in media, like podcasts, streams, videos, and images, talking about things like alt text and image descriptions, closed captions, and high contrast text. And yeah, I wanted to open the floor for thoughts about these topics. And if anybody had particular things to say, feel welcome to go for it.
I know Keegan touched very briefly on contrast earlier. And that is something that I find is lacking in a lot of media. So sorry, Lion, I'm gonna do this on screen. If you look at the overlay we are actively using, that gold and brown can be very hard to distinguish if you have visual impairment. I love actually our closed captions right now. I love the contrast on that. But there are actual standards, and I know of at least 3 websites that you can stick the hex code in to get the contrast, and it will tell you the industry standard for it. So if you're at the first level, second level, or AAA standards, and I found it really useful. It will also help when you have a bot automatically transcribing any text from your images.
I'm curious if folks have had experiences with actual plays or live streams, podcasts, all of those things where we've been able to access them because of things like closed captions, transcripts, and then like maybe some experiences of things we've wanted to access that like haven't been as accessible because of those things. I also feel like if anybody would like to pick up the topic of content warnings, I feel like those are also a really big accessibility tool for me. I know I'm watching the current season of Dimension 20 Never After, and I've loved all the content notes that they have with timestamps on those videos. I know it can be quite a lot to go through if you're producing an actual play and make notes on that. And it's also a practice that I've really wanted to start. In Crow Mythica, we use content notices for every episode, but having the timestamps is actually like something that was genius and novel to me that I want to incorporate now. I think because we're also talking about mental illness as part of disability, for me as someone with depression and complex PTSD, knowing when triggers like that might be coming in an episode is so enormously helpful to me in being able to access that thing. It really helps me to know ahead of time what I might be able to expect so I can get my emotions in a place where I feel like I'm going to be able to watch the thing or take it in. And also to be like, you know what? Now is not the time. I'm going to come back to that later when I feel like I can. Or, you know what? I am going to skip over those 10 minutes to the next part. Just really, really hugely helpful for me in that way too.
I love that. And I love the fact you're bringing so many good tips. I love the timestamp thing. From the live in-game side, something I have seen is both the disclosures at the start and end of game, as well as a box on the overlay, which will read what the trigger is and approximately how long this is expected to go on. And that is in addition to normal safety cards and tools. Please, folks, this is not a standalone. Please don't just trigger warning. Please get your checklists from your entire table, posts and DMs included. It's super important.
This is more of a narrative thing, but I would like to shout out the podcast Friends at the Table. they recently did, not recently, oh gosh, time has passed. They did a gothic horror show, or gothic horror season in like, I'd like to say 2021, 2022. And what was really neat was that the GM, Austin Walker, actually seeked out sought out sensitivity consultants for some of the world building he did, because body horror in and of itself can be laden with a lot of ableism, just in terms of what we've seen in horror. But also one thing I really liked was that he admitted out loud to finding someone who identified as plural as part of a system to talk about a class of characters in his season. And I thought that was really cool because I feel like that's something that's not really thought of in terms of just consulting people. It's often like talked about, but I haven't seen it like actually used in um, actual plays. So it was really nice that he not only gave a shout out to that, but also like admitted that this was something that he didn't know. And instead of doing a lot of Googling, he actually sought out someone who had the lived experience of being plural. And that really warmed my heart because I do have a lot of friends who are plural and that often get demonized in media. So it was really nice to hear that admittance of finding outside help and also making that a hopefully normalized thing.
Yeah, I just want to give like a +1 to putting like timestamps on content warnings because I tried listening to Alice Isn't Dead, that one podcast on it was made by the same people who did like Welcome to Night Vale, but there's a scene in there that's just very gory, and depending on the type of gore, I can just listen and be fine, or I can skip or just speed it up. But like I was at work, I think I was eating a sandwich, and it just was so awful that it just set off. I have not been back to that podcast. So conversely, I they wrapped up a while ago. I'm behind. But the Bombarded podcast was really good about putting timestamps on certain scenes that needed to have content warnings. And so I would look and be like, oh, okay, cool. Or when I would listen to like the Magnus Archives, they would have timestamps too for the content warnings. And then I would be like, well, this looks like it has a lot of blood. Am I going to be cool? Maybe I'll wait until after I'm done eating. And like it also depends on the description. You know, did someone just cut their hand, or for me anyway. But I definitely agree that like timestamps are so helpful because then you can take that moment and be like, am I ready to do I want to dive into this right now or ever, or do I just want to skip past it? Sometimes for me, it's just easier if I speed it up because then it just sounds like chipmunks talking about axe murder or whatever, which makes it funnier and thus not an issue. Um, as a sensitivity consultant, I've actually done some content warnings, not for actual plays, but mostly for like material that's been published. I had one for Playing Dead where I don't remember, like it was because just of the nature of it, because it had to do with necromancy, like there were so many content warnings. And the specificity of like body horror and all of that going on. That is definitely, I think, just like as a blanket thing for anyone listening and anyone who might listen to this later, definitely do research into body horror as it relates to disability tropes. Uh, Shout out to all the people who have reached out to me and have had that in their works and have completely listened when I told them don't do this thing. But I don't know whether that's just like, because I'm not, despite the fact that I'm making a horror game, I'm not actually really into horror. I'm really good at writing it, but I'm not always a fan of it. But I do know that that is a lot of horror relies on tropes that are ableist. And so when you're like designing whatever you want a creature, a story, a narrative beat, you know, maybe put that into Google with like disability or ableism and see if something comes up because most of the time it will. And, shout out to one person in particular who pointed out that, okay, I did recognize that this was ableist, but I thought I had scrubbed all of it out. Thank you for pointing it out. I will scrub further. So, Like definitely the main thing is like don't be a dick, okay? Like if I tell you that something is wrong, like just be like, okay, just like don't spend the whole time arguing with me. Like anyway, that's a separate panel.
Absolutely. If you're gonna consult with someone, don't argue with them. That is their area of expertise. I would like to remind Chad that we are super welcoming to questions.
I was just going to say, Basil, I'm so glad that you talked about your sensitivity consultant experience, because I was going to ask you to do that if you hadn't brought it up. So wonderful. I did want to welcome any questions that might be popping up in folks' mind at this time. Feel really welcome to ask us whatever.
Just on a side note, thank you all for being so awesome today. I have loved every minute of this panel, despite it being slightly difficult from the tech end at the start for me. So it has been glorious. And thank you for all the wonderful tips that I am walking away from this with.
Well, I know it's time for us to start winding down. So while we wait for any questions that may come in from the chat, I just wanted to ask y'all if there's anything we haven't gotten to that you really wanted to talk about today.
I actually had a quick go back as I realized as we were talking about accessibility as it relates to design and things that we do as designers to accommodate. For people who have played my games or looked at my games, you might notice that there's a consistent trend with the way that I do dice, which is D6s. I use D6s, and very rarely do I use any other type of dice. Because one, it's really easy to find a D6 in your house if you have like Monopoly or Sorry or what have you. I don't Mousetrap, I think he still uses dice. A Clue? Does Clue use dice? I can't remember after they updated it and added those weird murder cards. But the point is D6s are really simple and the math for them is really simple. The highest number is 12, the lowest number is 2. Despite that, there have been times where I've said the lowest number is 1, and my sibling has been kind enough to point out that no, if you have 2d6s, then the lowest number is 2. So that is something I try to do with my design philosophy, because I'm wholly uninterested in making you roll a bunch of dice and then add them all up together. Like even if you were using an online dice roller, it's like, roll 12 d12s. It's like, one, do you even have that many? I mean, maybe you do. Maybe you're that person who has that many dice. That even if you're using an online thing, it's just like now, either the computer's adding it or you're adding it, and then you have to keep track of all that. And then I have to do the math and the probability. And no, 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 no. Like, let's just keep it simple, D6, maybe a D12 if you have that instead of 2D6, something light and easy. I try to also keep like the terms that I use in my game simple, like this is how you do this is how you do that. I try to include like example scenarios of how you use this ability. I remember when I was working on the Ashcan, or like the unedited version of Pelagos, there's a whole section explaining how combat works. And I was concerned for a moment that I had dipped too far into the crunchy weeds. But as I had some friends look it over, they said, no, this is really straightforward. One of my friends jokingly was like, actually, you could be a bit crunchier. And then I gently booped them virtually and said, no, bad. No more math. This is the extent of what we're doing. So I think honestly, like, I don't know. Maybe it's because of how my brain works. I just don't see the appeal of I think there could be an argument for it. I feel like I have seen a few tabletop games where that sort of crunchiness is supposed to be like thematically or emotionally like desperation or despair, because I mean, I certainly feel despair thinking about all those dice to roll and the math to do. So like I think it can work in certain settings, but in other times, I think as like designers, you should take a moment to look at your work and ask yourself, do you really need all those dice? Do you really? Or can you, instead of using 6 different types of dice, can you maybe just use 3 or 2? I'm not arguing for one. I feel like maybe you probably need at least 2, but
I would really like to touch back on when Basil said simple terms. That is so important for me when I'm reading through systems. And we touched on cheat sheets earlier. And one thing I've seen in not enough systems or adventures is a end index of all the tables rather than having to flip through a bunch of pages or a PDF, just have them all at once. Personally, I tend to prefer bullet points than paragraphs. I don't know if anyone else finds those a lot easier to parse. And those were things that have always made my consumer experience, because I don't publish anything, much better.
No, yeah, I definitely want to add a big +1 to what Basil said about using D6s. I recently got the immense privilege to playtest Along the Road to Everywhere, and it used only D6s, and it was relatively like I was brain fogged the day I was supposed to GM, and it went so smoothly, not only because of the roleplay focus, but also the dice. But I digress. I really love the fact that as indie TTRPGs are coming into this space of TTRPG, just actual plays and streams, I really like the fact that we're moving away from these games needing to be so crunchy and difficult to parse. It's like a barrier, and that we're just like moving into just like, admitting that this is just a game of pretend and we're all relearning how to be kids again. And these numbers help us guide it along the way. So I think that's really nice. And I'm really glad a lot of designers like you, Basil, are keeping that in mind for all of us.
Yes, to everything that has been said. Um, I think in my like closing ask would be just remember that like disabled people exist. For those of us who are disabled, we remember we exist. And to non-disabled folks who may be watching or encountering this panel, please remember we exist. Please ask us about our needs and follow through with us if you really want us at your tables. And I think another ask of mine would be remember that we exist in the worlds you build. That's a thing that for me has been an internalized ableism that I need to remember to include many disabled people and many different kinds of disabled bodies and minds in the worlds that I build. And I would ask that of non-disabled game designers, GMs, and players to maybe consult with us. Shout out to Sensitivity Consultings as you're building your characters and your NPCs and your worlds. But build in disability, because a world with non-disabled people is a reflection of a world that's kind of like eugenicist and that doesn't have all of our beautiful wisdoms and everything we have to offer. So I think that's my like concluding pitch to everybody today.
I have one single thing to add to that, and I'm so sorry, Esther. Remember that you will not always be able to tell which of your friends are disabled. I spent years not talking about it, not identifying with it, but very sick and not making accommodations for myself. And no one could tell, quote unquote. I was just really bad at everything I did.
Yes, thank you so much. That is such an important point. We get told, or at least I have, by doctors and medical professionals and others all the time, well, you don't look sick or you don't look disabled. And you cannot always tell simply by the way you think someone looks, whether they are disabled and what they may be dealing with in their own body or their own mind. So absolutely, yes. Well, as we're closing up, where can we find all of us online if folks would like to follow us and our work? And I'll invite Basil to go first.
yeah. So you can find me on Twitter at Kobanya_Kana. So Kana. You can find me on Tumblr and Pillow Fort as Kobanya. On Tumblr, it's very easy to find me. I have yet to change my icon because it suits me perfectly. It is Nightwing's Tushy on the asexual flag. Asexual flag as a background. Apparently, it makes me very easy to find on Tumblr. It was made by somebody else on Tumblr, and I just refuse to change it because it sums me up. I'm asexual and I like Nightwing's butt. uh, I also have a website, towerofbasil.wordpress.com, but you can also find that on my Twitter profile. I don't remember what my icon is for Pillow Fort, but I am Kobanya. I have an Instagram, but I don't recommend following it because I just use it to try to win free stuff. So there's not much of substance on there. But if you really want to, I don't check it that often. I believe it's also Kobanya Kana. I believe that's all the places you can find me outside of the Cybertopia actual play, which is on Twitter. I think it's at Cybertopia AP. Um, and I believe the episode that I was in came out. Quick shout out again to Cybertopia because I couldn't make the first recording because I had a spine flare and just I was exhausted. Oh boy. So I think those are all the places you can find me though.
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at steadfastpetrol. That's steadfast, STEADFAST, petrol, PETREL. Yeah, I like birds, I like TTRPGs, and I like drawing. And you can also find me on Warding Bond, an actual play TTRPG we're on, where I play a psychic camp counselor trying to keep the camp safe from cryptids. And you can also find me in the upcoming audio drama, Eerie. You can find that at Eerie Audio.
All right. I'm Wilder. You can mainly find me here or at Twitter at TTRPGFay. And I do want to note I'm dropping everyone's Twitter links into the Twitch chat. Hopefully that will make someone's life easier.
Thank you so much. And you can find me at Dungeon Minister, dungeon like Dungeons and Dragons, and minister like a minister, on Twitter and everywhere else on the internet, because who knows how much longer I'll be on Twitter, but I'm Dungeon Minister on every social media network. You can also find me GMing Chromythica, and you can find us on Twitter at Chromythica or at chromythica.com, where we have links to transcripts and our episodes on YouTube and all major podcast catchers. And you can also find me as the new co host, one of the two new co hosts of the No Direction podcast, which you can find at No Direction on Twitter and at KNOW Direction online at their website and everywhere else. And yeah, I think that's basically it for me. Thank you all so much for being here. I have had so much fun today and have learned from all of you, and am just so happy to have been here. Thanks so much.
I actually have one last thing I just thought of. I do want to again plug the National Association on Mental Illness. And one thing we did not really touch on was the correlation between anxiety, depression, PTSD, and disability. This is something incredibly relevant that we unfortunately don't have time to talk about. But I would again like to remind everyone, if you have the ability, to please support this amazing foundation.
Thanks, y'all.
Helps if I'm not muted. A very quick thank you to those amazing people. Thank you for being here for this great panel. Chat, I hope that you've enjoyed this because it's been absolutely phenomenal. And I know I've learned so much, and I hope you have too. Please take the time to check these phenomenal people out over on socials or anywhere else that you can find them, because there is so much that you can take away. We're going to disappear for a moment. Well, now it's just me. I'm going to disappear for a moment, and you're going to see some of our scheduling as I go tell all these people how amazing they are again, and then go set up for our next game. But we'll be back in just a couple of minutes with our next game, Eat Trash, Do Crime. See you soon.